his attention span is not very long, and his approach to problems that can't be solved or merely to ignore them, go away from them. So I do worry that if these negotiations begin and are entirely fruitless, that he will be tempted to walk away. And that would be the worst thing for us to do, and I think worst thing for us and our European friends to do at this point.
Well, the US President Donald Trump has said Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiating towards a ceasefire and an end to the war. That was after his 2-hour phone call with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. In the last half hour, President Trump's been taking questions about this from reporters, and he talked more about President Putin's approach to negotiations.
I thought there was a very good chance, like a 50-50 chance, that he would say, I want to take the whole thing. I didn't know what he was going to say. And then they have a different kind of a problem. But I believe he wants to stop. Pretty sure.
Just now about backing away or walking away if it looks like it's going to be an intractable problem. Do you have a red line in your head of what would cause you to back away? And
yeah, in my head, but not something I'm going to announce. But yeah, definitely in my head I do, yeah.
Exactly would that
because this isn't our war. This is not my war. This is not the war. I mean, we got ourselves entangled in something that we shouldn't have been involved in. And we would have been a lot better off, and maybe the whole thing would have been better off, because it can't be much worse. It's a real mess. It's a death trap. Exactly. So I think that, yeah, I would say I do have a certain line.
Well, the Russian leader has said their discussion was very informative and quite a frank conversation. He said his country is ready to work with Ukraine on a memorandum on a possible future peace agreement. Well, Greg Treverton is a former chair of the US National Intelligence Council under President Obama. Good evening to you, Greg.
Hello. Nice to be with you.
Well, good to have you with us. Hearing a little bit more from President Trump there. I mean, just the fact that he spent 2 hours on the phone to President Putin. What do you make of what they appear to have discussed?
I hope he's right. I mean, I hope that Putin has decided it's time to end or at least pause. But it seems to me the conversation really left us more or less where we were before. That Ukraine would like an unconditional ceasefire, and the Russians still want to have a set of demands that they're going to try and impose on Ukraine in negotiations. So I hope the president is right, but I doubt it. The situation seems to me to be one increasingly of logistics. Can residual U.S. help and the Europeans who've stepped up to the problem in an admirable way, can they keep the Ukrainians fighting long enough to make it too costly for Russia? So far, I think the answer to that problem is mostly not. But as I say, I hope that the president is right and that Putin is prepared to at least have a pause, if not a serious negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump spoke to Keir Starmer, other European leaders, and President Zelensky, and then spoke to President Putin. But it doesn't appear as though he's confronted the Russian leader. From what we're seeing there, he seemed to dangle perhaps the prospect of a trade deal if the war was to end, and that's about it.
Yes, for all his self-assurance as a deal maker, he's made a lot of bad mistakes in this one. He's given away a lot of chips even before he started this by saying that perhaps Ukraine started this, by looking like he's siding with Russia. So he's been off to a very bad start, and exactly how much he can recover is, I think, a great question. He hasn't shown any inclination to threaten Russia with additional rounds of sanctions or other penalties. So he's mostly left it to Zelensky to see what he can work out with Putin. And we know that Putin's demands are going to be pretty maximal, that they're going to be no NATO, maybe no security guarantees, maybe no European troops in Ukraine, full control of Crimea and the other parts of Ukraine that Russia has taken. So it's hard to imagine a deal, as it has been throughout. It's hard to imagine a deal unless Russia begins to feel much more pain than it's felt already. So I'm pessimistic going forward, but the fact that they're going to talk, that's, as Dean Russ said, better to jaw than war.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, the two sides Russia and Ukraine are now both indicating that they're ready to have direct talks, direct negotiations. There seems to have been this suggestion that President Trump has talked about of the Vatican hosting these conversations, perhaps wanting to draw on the negotiations that went on the sidelines, on the funeral of the previous pope and so on. I mean, surely the fact that they are going to be talking is at least perhaps some grounds for optimism.
Well, I think that's right. It's got to be. The fact that they're going to talk, I think, is good, and at least we'll know more about what Putin is prepared to do, if anything. So far, the resolve on the Ukrainian side seems to be holding pretty firm. The question is, are they going to get enough help, enough, missiles and bullets and drones to hold the line? But so far, on that score, the Ukrainians look pretty firm, and at least in the negotiations, we'll have some sense for whether there really is any give in Russia's position, whether there is any real interest in getting this war over. And the reports we read now suggest that even the troops are sort of in this, which prepared to throw good money after bad, don't want to end the war lest it look like all those Russian lives that died were wasted. So
and we saw those lines from President Putin after the talks, talking about the need for Ukraine to address the root causes of the war, which would seem to suggest that he's expecting nothing more than practically a complete surrender from Ukraine. I just wonder what you made from those indications from President Trump that he was prepared to walk away from the process altogether. That was a very clear indication from what we heard when he was taking questions tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm not. We know his attention span is not very long, and his approach to problems that can't be solved or merely to ignore them, go away from them. So I do worry that if these negotiations begin and are entirely fruitless, that he will be tempted to walk away. And that would be the worst thing for us to do, and I think worst thing for us and our European friends to do at this point. So I hope that there is some promise in the conversations. I think it's good. They can get the Vatican involved. That would be, I think, a good thing as well. So it's a hopeful sign that they're talking, but it's not easy to be hopeful about the result of those talks.
What about this prospect that President Trump seems to have dangled of deals, of business deals to both Russia and Ukraine if they end the war?
Yeah, it's a typical modus operandi, I think, where he says, as he did in Gaza, imagining a Mediterranean resort in Gaza, that was pretty hard to imagine. But I think he does, and maybe sincerely, feel like there's business he could do, particularly with Russia, whether he imagines a chain of Trump hotels in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Exactly what he imagines is hard to know, but I think he probably is sincere in thinking that there's some economic opportunities. We saw that with the deal with Ukraine about minerals, where it did do something that at least got him and the administration more committed to Ukraine. So in that sense, what do we think about the specifics of the deal? It was a good thing in my view.
Greg Treverton, former chair of the US National Intelligence Council. Been really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to speak with you.